Today we're looking at some of the best young players that have been linked with moves away from their current club. I asked for your suggestions at home for players aged 23 or under that you've seen on the market. We've got 20 suggestions to go through. Let's have it. We'll start with Giorgio Scalvini to Newcastle. Heavy rumours over the last 7 days about this transfer. Still only 21 years old, and he's had some pretty bad injury luck in recent months, hasn't he? Let's not forget he did his ACL. He then returned ahead of schedule, but then he had the horrendous shoulder problem. He's been out for a considerable amount of time with that. And when you take a year's worth of football out of the development structure of a 20, 21-year-old footballer, it can be really, really tough. When you add a transfer on top of that to a team like Newcastle, to the Premier League that's super physical, this might be a difficult kind of move. But there's no denying his ceiling. At just 20, he looked unstoppable at Atalanta, and he mainly playing in a back three, over 100 Atalanta appearances by 21 years old. I mean, even when he was 18, he was starting 30 or so games in Serie A. Super composed on the ball. Excellent physically, given he's 6'4", looks really commanding, very composed. In fact, if you run it back to the 23-24 campaign, those progressive pass numbers, he's in the top 20% of European centre-backs for his progressive passes, for his volume of passes, top 10% for his interceptions. There's definitely a little hint of the Dean Howson about his playing style. I think there's no doubt if Newcastle got hold of him, this would be a good signing, given that they've got Botman's injury problems, Fabian Schär not getting any younger, and the other options they've got at centre-back all aging out quite considerably. Scalvini would represent a huge coup in the market. Plenty of other top elite-level European sides are interested in him. But I would be reticent to put too much pressure on the move for a player who's coming back from such a bad injury-hit season. And asking him to then adapt to playing a back four, this might take a little bit of time. We're talking about another centre-back next, and that is Mosquera's move to Arsenal. This one looks like it's coming to a head, right? €14 million bids were being knocked back, but it feels like the move's going to get done to about the tune of €20 million. Arsenal obviously focusing on that Victor Gyökeres deal, the Madueke deal. Mosquera feels like it's taken a bit of a back seat, but we should not let this transfer go under the radar. At 21 years old, Mosquera put up the best ground duel win rate in the entirety of La Liga last season. And if there's something we know about Mikel Arteta, he wants his signings to win their duels. Take, for instance, Zubimendi, a huge duel winner. Marino, a huge duel winner. Well, Mosquera is no different. I think the under-21 Euros as well really boosted his profile, especially on the international scene. The fee seems an absolute bargain, given they've let Tomiyasu go. There is a hole of those centre-back options that wants to play on the right-hand side. I know that Timber can do it, White can do it, but they've predominantly played in that right-back role recently. Mosquera for 20 million. I mean, that is a really good signing. Hayden Hackney just sneaks in here, just at 23 years old. The Middlesbrough midfielder is being heavily linked with a move to Crystal Palace. I think this is an interesting option for Palace, given that Adam Wharton's progressive numbers have been the talk of the town. You know, we've been speaking about Adam Wharton as being a superstar in the making, almost ready for a move to a club like a Liverpool. Real Madrid were reportedly monitoring him. Well, Hayden Hackney profiles a little bit similarly. This is a player who's averaging 10 progressive passes per 90. Those are sort of Rodri numbers from the deep-lying role in that Middlesbrough midfield. Didn't get loads of minutes for England at the under-21s, but season-wide last campaign in terms of under-23 midfielders in Europe, nobody put up more final third entry passes than Hayden Hackney. The guy can get the ball from A to B really well. And we're talking about second place being Pedri, third place being Gvardiol. So he's in good company. And he's not just a passer, he's also a good ball carrier. He's the only under-23 midfielder in Europe to rank in the top 95th percentile for progressive passes and for progressive carries last campaign. He's still just 23 years old. A reported price tag between 15 and 20 million pounds feels cheap. I think if Crystal Palace can get this deal done, despite the fact he profiles quite like Adam Wharton, it would be a really good signing. I'm surprised some other clubs aren't interested in him. Why aren't Manchester United having a look at Hayden Hackney? A profile that is clearly missing from that side. A game controller, a tempo setter, and somebody who can get the ball from the deep-lying positions of midfield to the advanced positions of midfield really quickly. Wow, this next one Ethan Nwaneri to Chelsea would set the cats amongst the pigeons. This rumour has just bubbled away under the surface in the last 48 hours after a Fabrizio Romano tweet. Comes off the back of the news about Noni Madueke potentially joining Arsenal. Have Chelsea inquired about Ethan Nwaneri as part of that deal? He's only got 1 year left on his contract. I think he probably wants to stay, but his agent, not for the first time actually that Ethan Nwaneri's agent has done this, is just making a little bit of noise. And yes, he's still only 18 years old, but he actually scored 9 goals in all competitions last season for Arsenal. 11 Premier League starts, I think 37 appearances in all competitions, so not a small amount of minutes for a 17, 18-year-old playing in a side that is competing for major silverware. If you're Ethan Nwaneri though, are you looking at this project as a pathway block potentially occurring? Bukayo Saka is going to be the lock right winger, so you're thinking, could I be the support character in that right wing role? Well, if Madueke arrives, it feels like maybe you drop down to the third choice in the right wing role. What about in the number 10 position, where he's also absolutely superb? Well, captain of the club's there, Martin Odegaard, so your second choice. If Eze arrives, are you then third choice in that role too? If you're Nwaneri, you might just be saying to Arteta, if these options come in, where is my pathway? Now at 18, to have the bottle to go and say, I want guaranteed minutes in X position, I think you've got to be a superstar in the making, and that is what Nwaneri is. If Chelsea could somehow get hold of Ethan Nwaneri, there is absolutely no doubt everybody would be mind blown. I don't see a world in which it happens, because even at Chelsea, there is arguments to be made. The pathway is very difficult, especially in that attacking midfield. Come right wing role where you've got the likes of Cole Palmer, you've got Estevao arriving, and already high level talents in those positions. But either way, could you imagine the meltdown on social media? Next up, we've got Endrick, who could potentially leave Real Madrid on loan to Manchester United. That's what you guys were sending in on Twitter. There's also heavily links to the likes of Villarreal, to Real Betis, other German clubs. Now, he's still only 18 years old too, but clearly the Club World Cup has presented a few question marks around his future because of the emergence of Gonzalo Garcia. Now, Garcia, 4 goals in 5 Club World Cup appearances, physically capable already, it feels like. A bigger, taller, a different profile to Endrick. Gonzalo Garcia inside the box. You know, Xabi Alonso has likened him to Raul. So does that mean that Garcia has leapfrogged Endrick in the pecking order? Of course, Endrick has had some injury problems in this period. And last season wasn't ideal for him, I don't think. Those 300 minutes didn't amount to an awful lot of starts. Yes, I think Champions League-wise, he was pretty effective in very limited minutes. Of course, became Real Madrid's youngest ever Champions League goal scorer. But there is a definite pathway problem if Gonzalo Garcia has leapfrogged him. You know, Mbappe, the number 9, Gonzalo Garcia, number 2. Does that mean Endrick, who was signed for 60 million euros, becomes the third choice striker? Now, media reports in Spain are reportedly talking about Endrick leaving on loan, and there's been a few clubs that have been linked with him. The likes of Liverpool and Manchester United, the likes of Real Betis, that I see as a much more viable option than both of those English sides. Manchester United, to start with, I mean, what a mess to arrive into as an 18-year-old being asked to play minutes in that number 9 role. It just would be a poor career decision for him. I think the likes of Real Betis, very interesting. Villarreal potentially losing Tieno Barry next season. Could they bring in Endrick to replace Tieno Barry's minutes? Even in Germany, I'd rather go to than a club like Manchester United for development in your career if you're Endrick and it's going to be a loan. I personally don't see him coming to the Premier League next season. I would be really, really surprised. I think if we're linking him to Manchester United, which you guys sent in on Twitter, for me, that would be bad development. Whilst we're on the topic of Manchester United, let's talk about Javi Guerra, who obviously had a great under-21 Euros with Spain, captain of the Spanish under-21 side. A really interesting profile from midfield because he isn't classically Spanish when you watch him in his playing style. Progresses the ball really nicely with his physicality. He's very strong for a 22-year-old. But he also wants to receive the ball in the first phase, and he's very calm and composed under pressure. That is where you see the more classic Spanish side of him, a tempo-setting midfielder for Valencia. I'm pretty sure they'd be reticent to lose him, but with the financial situation at the club, they might well be forced to. heavily linked to AC Milan to the tune of 25 million euros. Of course, he was really close to joining Atletico Madrid last summer. I still think those rumours are rumbling, but we also saw him being really linked to Manchester United over the last couple of days. So let's focus on the latest links, and that's to Manchester United. I do think he is almost exactly what United need from that first phase position. A player who can pick the ball up and pass it really effectively, is calm and composed under pressure, is a really good line breaker with his carrying ability. He also contributes goals, 6 goal involvements last season for Valencia, and the fee is cheap enough to make it work. I really do think whoever gets hold of Javi Guerra is getting a really good signing. Do I think it'll be Manchester United? No. I would not be surprised to see Atletico Madrid do a few bits of business and end up bringing him in. Let's talk about Nick Woltemade. Then you will have seen him from his highlight packages if you haven't watched any Stuttgart, the 6'7" ball-carrying machine. Now, we're not talking Peter Crouch here. This guy's aesthetic ability on the ball is so fun to watch. He's putting up huge dribble numbers, huge progression numbers. I'm talking top 1 or 2% of European strikers, despite the fact he's 6'7". His feet are electric. He's also really creative, top 5% for expected assists and shot creating actions. In and around the box, he's a huge problem. Physically, it feels like he's still growing into his body despite the fact he's 23 years of age, and understanding how to use his side to shield off defenders, because even at 6'7", sometimes he gets knocked off the ball. But clearly this move to Bayern Munich is very advanced. He's agreed personal terms. It doesn't feel like a fee is going to be a big problem for Bayern. They're looking to find a young alternative that can rotate in and out with Harry Kane. In the long term, replace him in that number 9 role. He's very different to Harry Kane. He's not going to score screamers from 45 yards like Harry Kane is. His finishing work really happens inside the box, where obviously Kane is also a master, but he's much more of a between the posts, in the box finisher. You're not going to see screamers from 25, 30 yards from Woltemade. If Max Eberl can't get this one over the line, there's really no hope. This is going to be a good signing. I actually think in the number 9 role, given he's German, given what we've seen from him and the quick speed of his development at Stuttgart, I think he's got a really high ceiling potential at Bayern. Next up, we've got James McAtee being linked to Everton. This is an interesting one, isn't it? Obviously, in the under-21 team of the tournament, finalist, he was man of the match against Spain. Really good player, James McAtee, in between the lines. Exceptional at taking it on the half turn in tight spaces, threading little balls through into the striker's feet. But last season, we didn't see anywhere near enough game time at Manchester City. I mean, he wasn't even included in the FA Cup final squad. For a player of his calibre to play 300 minutes of football, it's just not enough. The links I was sent by you guys that you wanted me to talk about were to Everton, where I kind of feel like it's a bit unrealistic, if I'm honest, given I've seen the likes of Dortmund interested, RB Leipzig. I think the jump to Germany would be a much more interesting development path for him. You look at that midfield Everton have got with Ilias Mdai wanting to play in the number 10 position. Where is the role for James McAtee? Does that mean Mdai moves out to the left-hand side, or McAtee has to adjust his position? For me, it'd be really nice to see him jump ship and play in the Bundesliga, where the spaces are a little bit wider. You can be a little bit more transitional, and we've seen young English players thrive. Ousmane Diomande's move to Crystal Palace is slowly getting there, right? €55 million fees being talked about. He's still only 21 years old. Very surprising that Crystal Palace are being able to get this deal done without seemingly much competition, especially from the likes of Newcastle. I thought they would be heavily interested. But let's talk about Diomande's profile. I've spoken about him in recent weeks. For me, this is a mind-blowing move. He has an €80 million release clause, and they're going to get him for significantly less than that. He's played in a back three, which suits the Ole Glasner system. We've heard reports of Real Madrid being interested in him in the past, PSG being interested in him in the past. I think the development we've seen for players like Michael Elise at Palace has led to other young players in Europe looking at them as a potential feeder club. A couple of issues I potentially see with this transfer are his role within the back three. I spoke about it on last week's episode, but Maxence Lacroix last season, one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League, one of the best signings, played as the central centre-back. That's what we've seen Diomande do under Ruben Amorim, play in the middle of the back three, stepping into almost a defensive midfield position at times to receive the ball and begin attacks. Now, is that going to happen? Is he going to disrupt Maxence Lacroix's position? Is he going to have to play as a right-sided centre-back instead? We'll see. What we know is Oli Glasner is fantastic at developing players, and I really think Diomande to Palace could be one of the signings of the summer if it happens. People seem to have forgotten about Hugo Ekitike. The rumours have gone quite quiet, but he's still just 22 years old. We'll keep this one quite brief because we've spoken about him endlessly on other videos. Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool all being linked to him. One of the best under-23 strikers we've seen profile-wise and from a data perspective in an awfully long time. Yes, he had the dip when he went to PSG, but his early stage of his career in Liga, and now what we're seeing in the Bundesliga from a creative standpoint, from a technical perspective, from a goal output standpoint, he really does feel like the full package. But the fee is eye-watering, 100 million euros. Do I see anybody paying 100 million euros this summer for Hugo Ekitike? No. I think that fee is prohibitive. I think it's unrealistic. Take, for instance, a Manchester United or a Chelsea, who, Chelsea's perspective, have already bought in Delap and have Jackson. Do they then go and drop another 100 on Ekitike? I can't see it. I think he's a fabulous player, but I think Frankfurt are going to hold him to ransom this summer. Next up, we've got Bayern's latest punchy move for a left winger. It's Malik Fofana. Will Max Eberl ever get a left winger over the line, guys? Because of the Musiala injury, Thomas Müller and Leroy Sané leaving on contracts. The forward line at Bayern, before Nick Woltemade joins, is looking extremely thin, especially in wide areas. And Malik Fofana represents a market opportunity because of Lyon's financial problems. Clearly, they have to make money. Malik Fofana is not going to get many better options than Bayern Munich and has a high ceiling. 7 progressive carries per 90 in his breakout campaign this season. Decent goal-scoring output, and when you stack him up against Nico Williams, who obviously Bayern Munich really wanted to sign before the 10-year contract extension, he profiles kind of similarly. There's arguments to be made in certain facets of his game. He looks even more explosive than Nico Williams. But you would still be paying, a huge amount of money, probably 50, 60 million euros for a player who has only really started 16 Ligue 1 games. It's a risk. You never know with these players, but he does look electric. I'm going to say it'd be a good signing because at this stage, Bayern just need a warm body to play left wing. James Trafford to Newcastle feels like it will be confirmed this week to the tune of £35 million. He's still only 22 years old, so does sneak into this list off the back of a ridiculous season at Burnley. An English record-breaking season for the amount of goals Burnley conceded. I think it was just 16 in the championship season. And he played a huge role in that. By far and away, the biggest XG overperformance from any goalkeeper in England. 29 clean sheets in league football. And when you combine that with the fact he's brought through the Manchester City Academy, he's excellent with his feet, he's homegrown. There's literally no downside to Newcastle signing James Trafford. I actually think it's an upgrade on Nick Pope. I think Nick Pope, once upon a time, an amazing shot stopper and still delivers from a leadership perspective. But with his injury record and some of the performance we saw last season, I think James Trafford goes in there and is the number one straight away. Andy Diouf to Burnley feels like it's on the rocks a little bit, but might well get over the line to the tune of 17 million euros. 22 years old, part of that France under-21 side, an amazing ball carrier, huge progressive numbers. I think one of the biggest strengths of Andy Diouf's game is picking it up in the first phase and driving up the pitch. And that is arguably what Burnley are going to need next season. No Josh Brownhill, as things stand, captain of the club. 39 appearances last season, let go, or he didn't sign a contract extension. So there is a hole in the midfield, and it feels like they lack a little bit of physicality in there too. With a contract up in 2028, it feels like the fee is still really, really reasonable. For me, it would almost be a mind-blowing signing, the idea of Andy Diouf going to Burnley. Lots of other clubs across Europe have been interested in his signature, but I guess kind of just illustrates the pulling power of some of the Premier League riches. Even the clubs like Burnley are able to pull players like Andy Diouf out of the France under-21 setup. Next up, we've got Alejandro Garnacho, who reportedly wants to stay in the Premier League, and the links persist with Chelsea, who reportedly want to bring in another left winger. Chelsea fans, what is going on there? Because Jamie Gittins has arrived. I know you've lost Sancho, but does he not replace him? Well, Pedro is also at the club, so where is the development path for Garnacho? When I think of Gittins versus Garnacho, you know, Gittins definitely has the edge in 1v1 dribbling situations. He's more explosive in 1v1 situations. I don't know, man. I'm just a bit confused how you have two 20, 21-year-old wingers fighting for one position on that left flank. And then you've got João Pedro. Nicholas Jackson can operate out there as well. I'm just slightly befuddled. I'm actually going to say bad development on the surface of things, but I might well be wrong here. Garnacho might be coming in as the starting left winger, wanting to play and getting game time every single week in the Premier League because it feels like that's what he's ready for. And when you're spending £60 million on him after you spent £50 million on Gittins, the debate as to who starts and where the playing time comes from will be rife. We move on to Xavi Simons to Tottenham. That was sent in by a lot of you, actually. Also Bayern Munich links emerging to the tune of €75 million after that Musiala injury. But let's focus on Tottenham right now. And the debate here for me is, would you prefer Xavi Simons or would you prefer Kudus? I would prefer Xavi Simons. You know, at 22 years old, we have seen a ceiling from Xavi that is one of the best young talents in Europe. No doubt, still only 22 years old. I know that Leipzig paid a significant fee for him, but in that first campaign, obviously last season was pretty injury hit with the ankle issue. In that first campaign, the creativity, the ball carrying, I mean, top 1% for shot creating actions. It was the emergence of a star. And yes, he might not have the physical capacity of Kudus to just blow past people in 1v1s. You know, Kudus' dribble success rate and his pace and power are much better than Xavi Simons. But the way Xavi Simons plays, the intricacy to his game, his dribbling ability, the smartness and tiny little bits of detail to his creativity are just top level. So if you're going to spend €70 million on Xavi or €70 million on Kudus, Tottenham fans, I'm really interested to see who you would go for. If Xavi went to Tottenham, I genuinely would also have this in the mind-blown category. I think he is that level of talent. Like, he is an actual superstar in the making. Carney Chukwuemeka to Dortmund might well be made permanent. You know, £40 million release clause. He's still there on loan. But the minutes just aren't really coming, are they? 250 minutes of football across the second half of the season. One start for Dortmund in the Bundesliga. He hasn't yet started a Club World Cup game. There are clear arguments to be made he should be starting over Julian Brandt. I know Brandt is definitely in favour of Niko Kovac. You know, scored in his first game, didn't he, when he took charge? He went through that spell where he put up 8 goal involvements in 6 games under Kovac. And Carney Chukwuemeka is more of a project. You know, Julian Brandt's 29 years old. He's very established in that Dortmund side. But at times, I think Carney should have got more minutes in there. Not sure where Carney Chukwuemeka's minutes and time would come at Dortmund if Brandt is just going to be locked down in that 10 position. For the right fee, I suppose it is still a good signing, but let's please get a pathway for the guy going. Tieno Barry to Everton is all but announced. By the time you watch this, it might well have been announced, to the tune of €35 million. Is this mind-blowing? It's bordering on mind-blowing. The guy was absolutely exceptional for Villarreal last season. Not just from a goal-scoring output standpoint, but he was one of the most creative strikers in La Liga last season. His 0.45 non-penalty expected goals per 90 was better than any striker at the club. They've lost Dominic Calvert-Lewin. His age profile is more appealing than Beto. Different kind of player, but he's still 6'4", so provides the physicality that David Moyes wants from a number 9. For me, this is one of, you know, slyly one of the moves of the window so far, if Everton confirm it over the next couple of days. How about Harvey Elliott and Brighton? We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago. The rumours persist, and you guys wanted me to speak about his future because he was the outstanding player, really, I believe, at the tournament for the under-21 England side. Obviously helps, he's more experienced, he's 23, but it is now time to get a move. What was it, 2 or 3 Premier League starts last season, and those came when they'd already wrapped up the title. Clearly, with the arrival of Florian Wirtz as well, there are question marks as to the role Harvey Elliott is going to play, because it's not going to be centrally. And then is he really going to usurp Salah at any stage on that right wing? I don't see it. He needs to move for his own playing time. And Brighton represents a really interesting fit. We know how well they've been able to improve young players, and there is a stack of options in that number 10 position come right wing role, but they have also lost João Pedro, a different kind of player, to a Harvey Elliott, but it would be a coup. If they can get Harvey Elliott, it would be a coup. The issue remains the fee, £40 million with a buyback clause, or £50 million plus with no buyback clause. That is a lot of money for Brighton to be spending. When he plays, though, we're talking about a player who is in the top 90th percentile for shots, goals, non-penalty expected goals, shot creating actions, dribble completion rate. His on-the-ball ability, his goal threat is massive. He's been a big impact player for Liverpool, actually, when he's come onto the field as a substitute, scoring late goals, scoring impactful goals. Yeah, this would be a good signing for whoever picks up Harvey Elliott. Jarell Hato's name to Chelsea is still being linked. I do think Chelsea need a left-back. If Cucurella gets injured, what do? Who's the backup left-back? And you might be saying, well, he's more of a centre-back, Jarell Hato. Well, 40 starts last season at left-back in all competitions for Ajax, so he can definitely play there. We've seen him captain the Dutch youth sides. He's a leader, amazing on the ball. The youngest ever player to 100 Eredivisie appearances for Ajax, whilst also scooping the Eredivisie Young Player of the Year award. He's very physically developed as well, 6 foot, so he could offer cover for Colwill in that left-sided centre-back role too. There's no downside here for Chelsea. This feels a super Blueco move. You know, Blueco have gone and taken some of the best young talents in world football for fees that are quite large. Jarell Hato at €50 million would be quite large, but would it be out of the kilter of this Blueco signing style? I think it would be exactly in their wheelhouse. I think given they need a left back, this is a good signing. Finally, we've got Ben Sesko. I mean, lol? Like, what does he do now? Ben Sesko, now that Arsenal have gone for Gyökeres, Man United can't afford him, Chelsea clearly aren't going to pay the €90 million required there, he's going to stay. And that is probably the best thing for his development, honestly. Some of the moves we saw him being linked with, I was a little bit unconvinced about. Other than Arsenal, would have been a great fit at Arsenal, would have scored a bunch of goals at Arsenal, joining a team that was super settled tactically under a superb manager. But no, he's going to stay. I don't know of any club other than Arsenal who even had the level of interest for the money required to get Sesko out of that club. Okay, so those were some of the best transfer-linked youngsters we've seen in Europe. Did I miss anyone out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. I'll see you later. Goodbye.